Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward, Chapter 131. An earth-shattering crash sounded as the lone figure landed, making an impact crater as its limbs buckled beneath it. A horrid scream of anguish emitted from the creature. Then it methodically started the process of pulling itself to its full height. Dark, blackened appendages moved where arms should have been on a normal man. There was no blood, even after falling from a great height. It could be no mortal flesh. The figure moved, bringing its twisted, misshapen face to the earth, sniffing through a crude gash in the place where a nose should have been. It moved like a wild beast, searching for a scent. There had been signs of a struggle here. A great serpent had nearly claimed a victim not more than 2 yards from this very spot. As the creature pressed its face to the dirt and sand, the silent coils of the great snake emerged once more from the dark fissure, which had been cut into the very land itself. Undulating and moving with a sudden speed, the giant serpent struck without mercy, burying its fangs in the unprotected back of the creature. Garbed like some cruel parody of a man, the creature howled in a mixture of pain and fury as the serpent struck. Trying to scrabble away from its unseen attacker, the figure strained powerful limbs, digging for purchase, trying to escape. The giant adder struck again, this time catching the creature in the neck, the serpent's spittle dripping down the creature's body from multiple puncture wounds. A blood-curdling bellow of agony came then from the figure, responding to the deadly touch of the enormous snake. The creature was jerked about like a rag doll, and yet there was no blood. The adder moved again and began wrapping its coils around the twitching wretch, tightening with inhuman strength. For a moment the figure sat there, tight in the serpent's clutches, gasping for air. Then it slowly stopped struggling, falling further and further beneath the coils of the diamond-backed adder. Yassim Del had managed to crawl away from the spot on his belly at least 200 paces. Not trusting what might be found lurking in the fissure which ran horizontally through the area, he had pulled himself up against a jutting rock face. The red rock cliff face only afforded him partial shade, but it was better than death at the hands of the deadly reptile. Hands bloodied to a pulp from his previous encounter, Yassim lay wheezing, trying to catch his breath, trying to simply last until nightfall. He had not expected the horror to return, but neither had he expected a figure to fall from the windless sky above. Yassim could see a bulge in the coils of the serpent's roiling mass. It was pressing outwards with a feeble strength. The serpent's head fell upon the creature again, in a flash of fangs, a muted whimper of pain echoing afterwards. But the bulge grew. In sick fascination, Yassim watched as the thick coils of the serpent were pried apart by the blackened husks that ended in misshapen attempts at human hands. They moved with a strength that appeared to be unfaltered by lack of air. The serpent's gaping maw struck again and again. A dizzying surge of screams fell in response. But the arms continued to pry and rip, exposing a heavily muscled figure beneath, its mottled skin stretched horribly. A sun-darkened face appeared next, deadened eyes staring straight at Yassim. An auguring cold bit deep into Yassim's heart. Nothing in this life had presented such a feeling of dread. The face disappeared again as the serpent lashed itself more tightly around its form. But Yassim suddenly was unsure if the creature's death was assured. He had felt such a malevolence in that single meeting of eyes. Yassim did not trust that it would be stopped. If it reached him, he would die. Not waiting, Yassim began a desperate search for a hiding place. His mind returned briefly to contemplate risking crossing the great expanse and hoping the merchant scouts would not pincushion him with arrows. He had to find a hiding place. Surely death would come for him otherwise. A terrible hiss came forth as one of the hideous extremities tore a gash in the snake's skin. The misshapen fingers dug into the bleeding serpent and widened the tear in its skin. A flurry of movement and flashing of fangs continued and was met by a chorus of piercing howls, but the bloody fingers did not stop. Eventually, the serpent hung limp, as a great section of it had been ripped apart. Deep bloody furrows marked its length. With a sickening inevitability, the huddled mass began to disentangle itself from the dying adder. Yassim saw the creature's deadened eyes follow his own and felt his blood run cold. He forced himself to move again, his eyes desperate, searching out potential hiding places to escape the abomination. He found none against the barren wasteland. Yassim would gamble against the chance of being seen by merchant scouts. Any alternative was better than certain death which followed him now. The hunger came anew. Screaming, howling, shrieking voices of madness filled the creature's head. It would do anything to end this agony. Only killing the man it had tracked would bring reprieve. Fire suffused every particle of its being. The roar of the flames coursed through it, contracting every muscle past the point of agony. Its tiny scar-like orifice, where a nose should have been, brought forth a maddened cry to kill. Garbled sound was all that came forth from the shambling wretch. Hideous and dark, only the hints of meaning could be guessed from the jumbled cacophony that it created. Tearing the very air with its ghoulish intent, the creature's voice became a high-pitched keening sound that came from the depths of nightmare. Through the haze, Haptal gained a moment of insight. He hated this part. Only once the beast had taken over completely would it allow him to watch, as a passenger might, the grim atrocities it would commit. Haptal felt the intense pain coursing through his body, like the creature whose body he inhabited. He felt the desire to do anything to make the pain end. But he was not just an animal. He had witnessed this before. Each time was the same. The pain would dissipate after extinguishing the life of his target. But it would not truly end there, no. He would feel the pain as the poor wretch left this world. He would feel it as if his own soul were being cleaved anew. So he fought it. It had been futile, each time. But Haptal would not give in to the madness that tried to rip his mind apart at the seams. He could see now, clearly through the creature's eyes, through his own eyes. Even if he had control of his faculties, he would be driven to this eventually. The pain had gone too far now. He would do anything to make it stop. The wretch he sought dangled like ripe, sweet melon just beyond his grasp. The man would burst after his tearing appendages ripped and tore him asunder. And then he would make the pain go away. Anything to make it stop. In a surge of focus, Haptal pressed his will against the creature, and it lurched in its tracks. Its arm drooped to the ground, twitching in a fit of spasms. The other appendages pulled them forward. Haptal could not stop it. He would die to make it stop. Blinding pain assaulted his consciousness, and a red haze covered everything as he sank back into the abyss. Darkness overtook him amid a sea of fire as his mind burned to a cinder. The creature wobbled, falling to its knees before emitting the awful keening noise once more. Yassim breathed in quick gasps, his nostrils flaring, trying to draw in more air to keep in time with his madly beating heart. He ran, no longer caring if he was struck dead by a missile. He sought any other fate than the grisly death waiting for him at the hands of the creature behind him. Ragged gasps came, heat and exhaustion overtaxing his body. Then his body simply gave out, right there in the swirling sand. Falling to the earth, his heart gave one last beat and lay still in his chest. Coldness spread through him like a fog. At first, his mind did not realize what had happened. Then the icy cloud covered him, blotting out the sun. The pain exploded through Haptal, then vanished as if it had never been. As he reached the body of the man, still twitching as the life left him, Hoptal cradled the man's head in his grotesque scab-like arms. The creature howled, and Hoptal stared deadened eyes into the man's fear-frozen visage. And he wept. Slinging the lifeless corpse under one arm, Hoptal moved forward on leaden feet. He had failed. He had expected no other outcome, but the cold reality of it hung before him. Looking down, Hoptal saw the man who had promised to return to his daughter only days ago. Surely he could not have escaped the man Durga indefinitely, but Hoptal had hoped it would have been different. Now this man's daughter would starve, waiting for a father who would never return. Because of him. He let out a howl of rage across the empty desert landscape, a glint of a scout's glass just barely visible on the horizon. Rasham would know of his success. Rasham, who had sentenced this man to death. Rasham, who Hoptal could still not believe had betrayed him. The man looked more peaceful now, as Hoptal gently closed the man's eyes. The muscles had contracted in a death grip, but at least his face had some semblance of peace to it. He would beg Rasham to let him go to the child so that he might leave her something to survive on. It would fall on deaf ears, he knew. If Hoptal could avoid the terrible pits, perhaps he could steal away in the night. The man's daughter was worth a month of punishment. She deserved to know.